Live from the internet, it's the Narrative After Show, bringing you the entire week in review. With Rachel Bitecofer, Eric Garland, and here's your host, Zev Shalev.
Well, hello, everybody. Welcome to the Friday Night After Show right here on Narrative TV. It's so good to be with you on a Friday night. We made it to Friday night, everybody. Hi to Rachel Bitecofer and Eric Garland. How are you, Rachel?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm really good. It's good to be with you tonight. There's lots going on in the news, lots to talk about. Ooh. Eric Garland's here as well. How are you doing, Eric?
Okay.
You're a little buffery, as we say in the business. Oh, and now you've disappeared. So, Rachel, last week we saw you finding a BMX track. Did you find anything exciting this week?
That was glorious. Yeah,
it was glorious.
Riding that high.
But nothing new.
This week I have not independently. Oh, actually, that's a total lie. Total lie. I can't believe you actually asked me that, because now that I think about it, yesterday I hopped on my bike alone and snuck out of the house because I wanted to see what was down the rest of this weird bike track path that's near the BMX place. And my kid can only go so far. He kind of gets, off topic. So I kept going, and I discovered like this bike path. It's just like right by my house, and it goes for a long time, and it goes past this beautiful park with a bunch of ponds, like man-made ponds in it. So I'm feeling pretty damn good about the house I bought.
Isn't biking just the best? Especially, when the weather gets nice. You get year-round nice weather, don't you? Close to that.
That's right. That's right. That's what I moved home for. I mean, I hated for 12 years. I'm so heat sensitive.
Yeah.
I've always been, even when I was an athlete, it was a handicap for me. I would flush, and humidity is just not my thing. And
I'm not a fan either.
Out east, I couldn't even enjoy. I couldn't do anything except for if it didn't involve being submerged in water. Like, I couldn't do it. So, yeah.
So is it true that you get all year round nice weather in Oregon?
So we're temperate rainforest on the I-5 corridor, which runs through the western half of Washington and Oregon and down a little bit into Cali. And so the winter is rainy, and you want it to be, because that's how we have the nickname, the Emerald Valley, right?
Right.
You have to have wetness. But in the summer, all the way from like June till October is just freaking beautiful. And you'll get some heat waves where it'll get up in the 90s, but it's dry heat. So even then, you're doing real good to do outside stuff, and it's just amazing.
Great. I love that. Mm-hmm. Maybe I'll become your neighbor one of these days. We got
Actually,
so much news.
Oregon's terrible. Nobody should ever come here. No, I'm all about the geographic sorting. I want more and more liberals to move to Oregon and keep me safe.
Right? That's the way to do it. We have so much news to talk about today. Most of it is not that pleasing, but I got to tell you, later on in the show, I've been thinking about those 7.5 hours of where Donald Trump has been on January the 6th and why the phone records have disappeared for those 7.5 hours. I think I have an idea of where he might have been. So everyone should stick around for that, because it's going to be really interesting as I unveil my theory, just a theory, but it's a good, well thought out theory about where Donald Trump was during those 7.5 hours. Plus, we'll talk a lot about what's going on in Ukraine, and we'll talk a little bit about the crime spree amongst police officers around the country. But we should start off with the really historic stuff, the really incredible big news of the day. Ketanji Brown Jackson, who soon will be a justice, not yet a justice, as everyone keeps reminding me, but currently still a judge, but on her way to becoming a justice. After confirmation yesterday, she did that with the words, "We've made it today," and on the White House lawn there with Joe Biden and, of course, Kamala Harris there to help her along. Pretty impressive moment for America. Don't you think, Rachel?
Yeah, it sure was. I think the quote for me from the confirmation celebration today was, within one generation, my family has gone from segregation to the Supreme Court, and it's a testament to the power of those two pieces of federal legislation, the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the Voting Rights Act of 1965, which fundamentally altered the South. It set into motion the Dixiecrat Revolution and, is at the kind of the beginning of the story of how we ended up in such a fucked up spot here in America right now.
Well, it's good you mentioned that because we've made a lot of progress in the last 100 years. They really, humanity has moved along very, very quickly. So this current little skirmish with the white man still holding on to his power, it's just a little skirmish. Overall, most people have gotten to live more equal, better compensated lives and better, healthier lives overall. People have progressed to a much better space than they were 100 years ago, I would say. And, we're having a little skirmish along the way here. And of course, there's some resistance to all of this change. But overall, when you look at these things, you look at the progress women have made in general, Black women have made now in the highest part of our judicial system. It's remarkable. It's remarkable that this happened today. And it's a barrier that's long overdue to have been broken. So it's thrilling that she's the one to do it. And she seems amazing, especially compared to some of the recent justices that have been put up by the GOP, which are like questionable at best. She really does seem like she fits the bill quite well.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest with you, I think Gorsuch and Amy Coney Barrett, I'm pretty good at like taking away the partisan blinders, right?
Yeah.
I mean, they were both totally qualified temperamentally in every way. Obviously, they're ideologues, and it's not their fault they can get confirmed. It's the fault of the system that is so sick now that we got rid of the 60 vote threshold in order to confirm judges to the Supreme Court. And the nice thing about 60 votes is that it forced a more centrist nominee out of both parties for a long time. That has completely, of course, gone out the window since McConnell got rid of the filibuster for the Supreme Court after we Democrats were forced to do so to get any of Obama's judges confirmed. They were holding hundreds hostage. We had to get rid of the filibuster for the lower courts. And so they used that as a justification. And, that's the price you pay. But in terms of the quality of, I would say, personality, family type things, we couldn't diametrically be opposed to people like Barrett and Gorsuch, right? But at the end of the day, they're very equivalent in terms of qualification and temperament.
Kavanaugh, not so much. Kavanaugh.
No, I would not say so. I mean, they sat there and called her a fucking child predator coddler. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just so, it would be anger. It would make you angry if it was, in any case, yes. I think that is an equivalent charge. And I think that she showed the temperament that you would expect somebody in that situation to be able to hold on to. And I'll never forget. I'm much less of a Kavanaugh extremist than others, as you might guess, just listening to me talk about the court as an academic. But I am certainly, that was just not a moment for me that was kind of, for me, worse than the whole other part was this man can't control his emotions, right?
Absolutely. A tantrum in the middle of his confirmation hearing, not exactly something you'd want in a Supreme Court justice. We have so much more to talk about tonight, and I'm going to play a little commercial break because I want to be able to have a free-form conversation after we come back from the break, and hopefully we'll find Eric to talk a little bit more about this, but also to talk about what Donald Trump was doing on Jan 6th. We think we figured it out, so stick around. We'll tell you more after this little break. Hey, everybody, it's Zev. It's becoming more and more expensive to buy groceries, and if you, like me, are trying to get all the nutrients and vitamins you need while still balancing a budget, it's nearly impossible to get all the nutrients you need from the food you eat alone. Never mind doing it on a budget, then it becomes absolutely impossible. That's why I'm currently doing a 30-day self-imposed Athletic Greens challenge. The plan is simple. Take the AG1 supplement throughout April and track any increase in energy levels, overall well-being, and vitality, all while boosting my immune system. Today is day 7, and the biggest fear people have about these green drinks is the taste. I happen to love the taste of this drink. It doesn't taste bad at all. It tastes a little fresh, a little tropical, but not too much. Certainly doesn't taste like your typical green drink. So it gets lots of points from that, and that's why I've made it to day 7. Hopefully you will try this too. AG1 is engineered to provide all the right nutrients at just the right time. Whether you want increased energy or improved muscle recovery, they've got it covered. And because they care about your wallet too, AG1 will only cost you around $3 a day. That's a pretty good deal. And there are no hidden fees. To make it easier for you, and because they love you, Athletic Greens is going to give you a free 1-year supply of immune-supporting vitamin D and 5 free travel packs with your first purchase. All you have to do is visit athleticgreens.com/narrative. That's the way we spell narrative, NARATIV. Again, that's athleticgreens.com/narrative to take ownership of your health and pick the ultimate daily nutritional insurance. by the way, it's a very yummy drink. I'm on day 7. I feel fantastic. It gives me all this good energy, which is, I shouldn't be surprised by it, but it really does make me feel pretty damn good. So people should try the Athletic Greens challenge and also the Athletic Greens offer we've got on athleticgreens.com/narrative. Do you like the new poster I made us? You like the little...
It's beautiful. I was thinking, dang, I need to like get my new headshot and put it in there at some point.
Oh, this is a great headshot of you. I'm trying to make these like balloons or like bubbles is what I was trying to say, and make them float around. So hopefully they'll do that in the next iteration of our poster. But people like the new opening, and I want to thank our friend Matt Fausa for spending so much energy of recording it and making it all look so fantastic. I should also tell folk that at narrative.org/TV, that's narrative.org/TV is where you can join in the conversation for the last time for free on the interactive player, where you can join in and share your thoughts. Hey, Eric, there you are.
He's back.
Hello.
We missed you. How are things?
Yep. Oh,
everything
good. Yeah, that's everything's good. It's just technology's not
buffery to
not agreeing.
I want to use that as a general description of my mood some days. Buffery. It's a good term. We had a lot of fun on the chat, on the call earlier on today, discussing where Donald Trump was for the 7.5 hours. I want to get to talk about that soon. I've got a whole idea here, a whole game of Clue for everyone to play. But before we do that, we should talk a little bit about the war, because it is horrific what's going on in Ukraine. And it seems to me like we're only just beginning to see the next big confrontation. We've only seemed to be getting to the very worst part of it now, with Russia now amassing new forces along the eastern front of Ukraine. And it looks like they're readying for a massive assault. And this time it's going to be a very different event, because, of course, Kyiv is an urban fortress. It was well secured by Ukrainians. It was hard to get to. Now we're talking about a very different territory all along the Black Sea. Very easy for the Russian Black Sea force to get to. Also very easy for them to try to approach on multiple sides. So, Eric, people should be bracing themselves that today's attack, where 50 people died at a train station, might not be the worst of it. There could be a lot more of these kind of civilian tragedies along the way as we're heading into what could be the very worst part of this war.
Well, you have the Russians involved. Mm-hmm. So as long as they're involved and there are civilian populations, then you're going to have that trouble.
They are just I don't know if they care about their image around the world. Maybe they don't care about it. Maybe this is the image they're trying to project. But the shocking nature of what they're doing is kind of, firstly, never been seen in real time. So I guess that's another factor as we're getting video of these atrocities coming to us first time. But it's ridiculous that they feel like this is a way that they can approach the world. It's just unbelievable that their only form of taking over this country successfully is to obliterate the people, is to obliterate the civilian population. That's what they've come to.
It's not what they've come to. It's what they've always done. I mean, if ask an Estonian, whether you're talking about the early 20th century or just after the Soviet Union came apart and the hardliners in Moscow wanted to take over again, over from Gorbachev, there was a train car that they discovered near Tallinn, Estonia, with 250,000 pairs of handcuffs. Mm. That was in the 1990s. This is a culture that militarily had no problem putting the machine guns behind the soldiers, right? Mm-hmm. Instead of the front line pointing forward.
Yeah.
It was behind the soldiers to prevent their retreat. Now, why would they retreat? Half of them didn't have shoes. Lots of them didn't have ammunition, and they were told to go into the field. This is their own soldiers. Mm. Well, you don't have ammunition now, but that guy up there does. And when he gets shot and dies, you can pick his rifle up. There are other, if you see through kind of post-Enlightenment Western eyes, the Russian actions don't make any sense.
Right.
If you see them through, and this is not stereotype and it is not Russophobia or anything. These are people that when it comes to war, they are brutal and proud of it. And they think that is what gets respect, and they're not wrong. Countries have certainly surrendered to their offenses, but they do not have the same view of war crimes as the rest of the world. So this kind of thing where you intentionally create a quote humanitarian corridor, and then when people try and go through it, you blow it up. That's a psychological warfare technique, and but it really does. It's an indication of their weakness on the field. I mean, really, on the
at least in the battlefield, they've been horribly unsuccessful. So what they're doing now is this atrocious, almost genocide. I'm wondering why there is so much resistance to the word genocide, because we, in fact, are seeing what looks to me like a genocide. When you look at the destruction of Mariupol, when you look at the scenes at Bucha, those places are seem horrifically targeted just because they were the people on the other side, which is basically the definition of a genocide. Well, I'm surprised that they were not getting into that a little bit further.
Well, first of all, a lot of the Western leaders are, and there's constant new meetings in Brussels and, with our European counterparts, to discuss the policies about what to do about these guys. The terms war crimes have come out very, very quickly. And that's, we forget, or rather, I think it slipped under the radar. There's a lot going on every day. Russia was voted off the UN Security Council. Or the Human Rights Council, the United Nations. Yeah. It's like, that's new. We've allowed them that position. And now it's like, no. Realistically, Russia and China should never have a seat on the human rights anything. Neither should the Saudis or the Emiratis.
Yeah, it seems to be always the worst.
Sometimes we do let them on.
Are on there, which is kind of ironic and horrific as well at the same time. But just to underline what I think we're going to head into. We're heading into a situation where we're going to see the very worst of the war, potentially, the most horrific scenes we've seen up until now, potentially. And, the attitude seems to be even a little bit of fatigue around the war. And also just, well, okay, let's just do this. Let the Ukrainians go ahead and, face slaughter against the Russians. And there seems to be a sort of an overall acceptance that this is just the way it has to be. And I'm wondering if you guys think it is the way it has to be, or whether there is, just on humanitarian grounds alone, is there a solution that we're missing here that, don't we as a world, as a society, aren't we sort of forced to at least try and help these poor innocent civilians that are being caught in this horrific genocidal situation?
To be clear, we're not doing nothing. We're doing everything we can do except for engage Russia militarily.
Yeah.
And, here's the thing, my thought on this, and I have no idea, I'm just pontificating. This is not my area of expertise, but I do think it is important that every time Anthony Blinken, the Secretary of State, or Joe Biden speaks about this topic, they say 3 or 4 times pointedly, we are not sending troops into Ukraine. We're not going to engage Russia militarily. Okay. And if you think about that, there's no benefit politically in terms of just pure politics for them to say that shit. In fact, it's the antithesis of that, right? Because it could leave you open to attack. And the fact that they keep saying it, the two of them, so intentionally multiple times every time they're in front of a press corps, it suggests to me that the generals are really fucking concerned about escalation. And especially as Russia's situation has become so desperate, because keep in mind, they made a couple of strategic blunders coming in, opening up too many fronts, not anticipating the Ukrainian response, and then not understanding that the world was not going to fuck around on these sanctions. We dropped a nuclear bomb on them. This week it came out that their economy is going to decrease and constrict by 15% at once. That's huge. It wipes out all of the gains that they've made economically since 2000. And Russia just did not assume that they would not be able to fund their own war effort, right? So, they're running out of money. They're running out of troops. They've lost 7 or 8 generals, which is an absurd amount. And it's a tipping point where you cannot maintain order well. I just think it's really telling. There must be somebody, and I trust the Joint Chiefs. I trust our security apparatus. I think it's still the best in the world by a million miles. Somebody is putting the fear of God both into Blinken and Biden every time they talk, to be clear about that. So it sucks. It's horrible.
This is the only thing we can do.
That says for the kids or for children in Russian on it. That's the thing that hit the train station. I know. At night I think about picking up my own, just picking my own self up and going and fighting Russians. I want to help them so desperately, but I like these policymakers, and I sure as shit don't envy them. I always thinking about intervention in the terms of it is a gamble of 6 billion lives. It's nothing we can rush into.
Yeah, absolutely. This is that missile that was labeled, I guess, in Russian for the kids, which is just for the children, which hit the train station today. And 50 people believed dead, but many hundreds may be injured. And these people were civilians trying to escape, trying to get out of out of Donetsk region, and trying to escape for some sort of safety because of this war that's approaching to them that's going to be so much worse than the war they've already experienced for 8 years. And then they have to be confronted by a deliberate, and regardless of what the Russians say, deliberate attack on the train station. Obviously a very, very important artery.
Yeah, because it's a civilian train station. It's not a military target. It's a clear war crime. And I think while it's frustrating maybe to hear Joe Biden and Antony Blinken not do the old Ronald Reagan, faux gaffe of the early 80s. Do you guys remember all the way back when there was hot mics in a press conference and Ronald Reagan said, "We've just passed new legislation outlawing the Russians. The bombing begins in 5 minutes." Mm-hmm. And I don't know in political lore if that was known to be an intentional mistake or if it was just, something that got caught hot. But, on our side, that was kind of like, because, politically, he's coming off of Carter and, the Iranians capturing hostages and, that feeling of impotence and weakness. And Reagan comes in and he's an actor and he's doing the bravado thing. And so that kind of works. And, it's frustrating to do the right thing when it's not as aggressive as you'd like it to be. However, I think Joe does it President Biden does it when he, somebody says, what about if Vladimir Putin's, I don't care what that guy thinks. I mean, that's Delaware, for that guy, it's pretty, it's pretty strong stuff.
No shit, if he was Thursday, he would just say, that guy, right, Eric?
Yeah.
He's censoring himself.
I mean, he's got it. He's still an Irish dude from Scranton. That's what he's thinking. He's that guy. But he's like, I don't care. I don't care what he thinks because he's now president. But it's a stronger position to let them. The second we enter that officially, and we become a belligerent in that, then we lose something major, which is the fact is. Russia is failing to achieve a really minor, basic military objective as a major world power. They can't even win in a much weaker state where they own a whole ton of the rich people and have, tunnels into their telecommunications networks and have working knowledge of their whole military and everything with all these moles all over the place. And it's right next door. And they can't even do that. Yeah. And again, you got to think like a Russian here, the way they keep power, especially when you have a really brutal dictator like Putin's regime, they have to show this very macho, super, strongly. That's why the dude's, it just looks ridiculous to us, but it works better on their people where he's on horseback and he's, naked from the waist up. That's like the Dukakis tank moment, a bit like, what? Yeah. But over there and, being super aggressive plays to the Russian people. But if you think about how their food prices are about to go up and how all their all the yachts of their rich guys, those are ours. And it's Friday, it's the after show. Where the fuck are they going to sail them out of? Arkhangelsk? Not as fun as Monaco, is it, asshole?
It's really interesting.
Côte d'Azur, everyone, Isle of Capri, Crete, Santorini, Greece, way nicer, right, guys? Not this winter, not this spring. You guys get Murmansk.
And you never get to travel internationally again. There's two things that come out of this.
And you don't get to travel. They just indicted Konstantin Malofeev, not just sanction him. Now they've indicted him. So Interpol red notice goes out. He goes to any civilized country where they all kept all their money. Then he gets arrested and extradited. On the same, put him on the same plane with Dmitry Firtash. Send them all over, as far as I'm concerned.
Can we just underline before we leave Malofeev there? I just think it's remarkable that Jack Hannock is Sean Hannity's producer. The guy he's indicted, he's co-indictee, or whatever the expression would be, is actually Sean Hannity's ex-producer. Like, no one seems to be freaking out about this.
I did not know this.
Yeah, so really? he hired Sean Hannity's ex-producer named Jack Hannock to go and start his extreme right-wing Orthodox TV network in Russia. And that's who he hires, is Sean Hannity's guy from the United States. And then he goes ahead and does this. He builds this TV station. And then on top of that, they conspire to do all the Ukrainian propaganda to weaken Ukraine and divide Ukraine. And then on top of that, they're busy buying TV networks in Greece and Bulgaria because, that's where their intentions are. The empire wants to grow. And so it's Jack Hannock's producer that's doing this. I mean, to me, it's just like, how can people not see this as being sensationally big news? The guy who's reading the news at 8 o'clock or 9 o'clock, whenever Sean Hannity's on TV, his producer is running the entire campaign for the oligarch in charge of this. It blows my mind away.
Wait, is his current producer?
No, his ex-producer, but still.
Oh, okay.
I mean, come on. It's his ex-producer.
I wouldn't fucking be surprised at this point, dude.
It wouldn't either. I'm sure they still talk to each other. I'm sure that, Jack calls Sean every once in a while and says, by the way, isn't this an interesting, point of view or the propaganda lead you might want to follow on your show tonight? It seems insane that Fox News still continues to be on the air. It boggles my mind.
Well, especially when you consider then that at the time period that probably they were together was when Sean Hannity was talking to Trump on unsecured phones, basically fucking nightly, right? So, I mean,
it was there actually before.
Kind of a problem.
It predates the Trump era, but I'm sure they spoke because they often are the same propaganda.
Hannick was more central to Fox News than that. He helped establish the network from a high level starting in 1996, and he left in 2013. And
right in time for
his new career. Yes, right in time to defy the Emergency Economic Powers Act and start, being a real bad boy.
Yeah, and then attacking Crimea while they're there. I mean, it seems remarkable. It seems remarkable that this is allowed to go on. We have to really confront this evil of Fox News and the Russian propaganda that's being foisted upon us. We shall do that on another day. But any thoughts on the anything else you want to say about the war before we leave the war? Because I want to get to Jan 6th. Anything else from either?
It's supposed to be happy hour. So
I know. I want to play Clue with you guys. You ready for Clue?
Yeah.
Would you like war or coup d'etat? That's Friday. Happy Friday.
It was Colonel Mustard in the library with Eric Shue.
There you go. That's the game I want to play tonight. That's exactly right. So we have been trying to figure out, I've been trying to figure out because I have lots of time on my hands, and this is a weird looking poster, but you can see what it says. What happened to those Trump missing 7.5 hours? Indeed, what happened to those missing 7.5 hours? Trump is reputedly not in let me back up here a little bit and change these slides and explain to you what is going on. So we know that Donald Trump was missing for 7.5 hours, at least according to the records given to the January 6th committee that's investigating the events of January the 6th. There's a missing 7.5 hours of telephone records that they should have had. They just don't have them. And yesterday, Donald Trump, maybe it was in the 6th, told this to the Washington Post. He said that, the 45th president has repeatedly deflected blame for stoking the attacks with false claims that the 2020 election was stolen. And in the interview, he struck a defiant posture, refusing to say whether he would testify before a congressional committee investigating the Jan 6th assault. Trump also said, and this is the important stuff, that he didn't remember getting very many phone calls that day, and he denied removing call logs or using burner phones. So we know that's kind of not true, right? We know that on that day, this is a great thing. These guys put together this chart showing exactly when Trump was taking calls that were logged and then when he wasn't. And this whole gray bar section in the middle is when he was supposedly, there's no records of him making any telephone calls, but we know that he did make telephone calls, but not obviously from this main number that tracks what the president was calling, which is exactly what the committee asked for. And that leads you to the question of how did Mike Pence, Senator Tommy Tuberville, and House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy, plus another person, how did they manage to get a hold of him? If they knew they got on the phone with him during those 7.5 hours, where was he? Now, the obvious questions you would have, or the obvious reasons that people have come up with so far are that he had a burner phone, which most people dispute because really, can you imagine Trump going to this corner store and getting a burner phone? I don't think so. The second possibility here, other people's phones. He was using other people's phones. It's quite possible he was using other people's phones. But, for 7.5 hours, loaning a phone when you could just have your own phone seems unlikely. Maybe he wasn't even there is the other possibility. Maybe he was just out. Also not really very likely. He didn't call anyone at all. Also not likely because we know that he did call people. Or they weren't logged. The phone calls weren't logged at all. But that's strange because they were logged just before and just after. Or maybe there's a cover-up. Maybe there's just a giant cover-up that's taking place and those 7.5 hours are removed. But that's weird. How did they get to that? There's no evidence to suggest that anything was taken out of the logs. So the logical conclusion for me is that he was just in a different phone. He was just somewhere else and not using that particular presidential phone line. So we know that he might have been somewhere else in the White House because according to Senator Lee, He told Brian Schott, he's a reporter of the Salt Lake Tribune, remember those Trump calls, and Giuliani, by the way, call Senator Lee, and it's not Senator Lee they want to talk to. They actually want to talk to Tommy Tuberville, who they're trying to convince to help them with their scheme to defraud the American population of their rights to vote. So this is according to Senator Lee and reported by Brian Schott. I went and found Senator Tuberville, handed him the phone, and explained that the president would like to speak to him. Lee texted to the reporter, and then he said, I stood nearby for the next 5 or 10 minutes as they spoke, not wanting to lose my phone in the middle of a crisis. Then the Capitol Police became very nervous and ordered us to evacuate the chamber immediately as they were forcing everyone out of the chamber. I awkwardly found myself interrupting the same telephone conversation I had just facilitated. Excuse me, Tommy, we have to evacuate. Can I have my phone? Senator Tuberville promptly ended the call and returned my phone to its rightful owner. Now, interestingly enough, we know where that phone call came from. That phone call came from a number from within the White House, where it says here that the former president called the phone of Republican Senator Mike Lee with a number recorded as 202-395-0000, a placeholder number that shows up when a call is incoming from a number of White House department phones, the sources said. So I think that tells us that he was in the White House, but maybe not in his office. I mean, that to me, am I right? Does that make sense?
Yes, from what we understand, I mean, wasn't he in the residence all day, glued to the television, fast forward and going back and be like rooting them on and telling everybody how great it was, and then finding out that other people were like, I feel like we're going to go to jail, you know?
I think we don't know where he was. We think he was watching TV. That much we've been told. But I don't know if we know whether it was in the residence or the White House or the Oval Office. We don't know. He could have been in both places, as it turns out, because... And this is where it gets into the theory point. I'm really, this is very much a theoretical conversation from here onwards. You know, there are ways to get from the White House Oval Office to the residence without anyone being tracked. You know this? Either of you know this? Yes, no?
Because I have no life and I spend too much time learning about this stupid shit.
I have no life, and I do this for you so you can find out that there is actually a secret tunnel beneath the White House. It's a 50-year passageway that will get you from the Oval Office to the family residence on the East Wing of the White House. And this was all discovered by U.S. News and World Report when they excerpted a FBI agent, former retired FBI agent, Gary Aldrich, when he wrote a book about Bill Clinton. In it, he discovered that the clandestine passage built during Ronald Reagan's presidency as a way to guard the president in a terrorist attack is certainly handy. Passing a panel on a wall adjacent to the president's restroom next to the Oval Office causes a secret door to slide open, leading it to a staircase down the well-lighted passageway. The tunnel comes out in a storage closet from the president's private elevator in the basement of the residence. There is a second exit near the office that was once the White House barbershop in the West Wing basement. The tunnel, dug in 1987 while Reagan was at Camp David or vacationing in California, was called Project ZP. Removal of the earth and concrete caused a large depression south of the Rose Garden, but reporters and staffers thought it was just a natural sinkhole. Reagan once used the tunnel to sneak Richard Nixon into a private meeting on foreign policy. So that's interesting. I thought that was really interesting. I didn't know that. Did you know that? So they have a secret passage. So if you want to sneak out, if you're the president, you just press the button on the wall, and I guess it opens up, and then you go downstairs into the basement. A few steps away, you're in the residence. You can do whatever you want to when you're in the residence. So so you could have been either in the residence or you could have been in the Oval Office. It sounds a little undramatic, though, for where he might be that day. It's probably a bigger possibility, I think. Dum, 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 dum. So the next thing that comes to mind.
Let's see. Now that you mention it, there was, remember like 2 weeks in 2017 when they like closed the White House to like totally change out the heating, ventilation, and air conditioning, the HVAC system.
Yeah, I remember that.
I want to make sure I'm not misremembering. Do you guys ever remember the White House like closing off for like 2 solid weeks?
Nope. No, it's very rare.
Any time since you were a kiddo?
No.
Never.
Yeah.
Nope.
I wonder if there were any additional infrastructure projects that went on during that.
There was a Rose Garden that was rebuilt by the former First Lady that was redone in order to have their little party, their little election party in the White House.
We don't call that a redo. We call that a murder.
A murder of the beautiful garden that was there. So there was some of that construction.
Travesty. That's what we call it, Zev. Travesty.
They took out the roses and put in Israeli signals intelligence devices. I'm sorry, did I say that out loud?
Imagine this, guys. The family that shits in gold toilets, has terrible taste. Shocker.
There's also there was a theory as well that it was Mark Burnett who was putting out who was getting ready for that shot, wanted a dolly shot of the which is moving tracking shot of the First Lady, which they landed up including in the big special that they did, and that might have been a reason that they decided to reconstruct the Rose Garden. It's quite possible that was the reason too, but who knows? Who knows? We don't know for sure.
Remember when that dumb shit fucking did the whole thing where he flew home from Walter Reed? And for COVID, and then ran up the stairs
and then coughed at everybody.
And he was.
That was really bad.
I can't believe he lived through that shit. Like, it's just like, that happened. That's a thing that happened. Remember that when he left the hospital with COVID and forced the Secret Service to sit in the limousine so he could wave at the crowd?
A bunch of Proud Boys that were out there. That was who came to see him.
We're sick people, man. Yeah. We need help.
There's been another bit of construction going on in the White House in recent past. This happened during the Obama era. So there is an underground bunker tunnel facility, I guess you should call it. It's always been there. It's been there for a long time, that connects the east wing of the White House to the Treasury offices across the street. And it's been in a bit of disrepair over the years. So during the Obama presidency, they did this giant dig. They didn't really tell people what it was about, but clearly, after the fact, it became pretty obvious that this was a rebuild of their very tunnel or bunker that existed between the two places. So looks like a pretty big dig. Looks like a pretty serious, high-end sort of top security kind of dig. This is White House photos. I'm not revealing anything here that I'm not supposed to. Okay. So everyone knows this information. It's pretty public that it's out there. This is from their very nice whitehouse.gov site, if people want to go check out what the build is all about. Now, to position everybody and to get a sense of where this tunnel really is, we're going to pull up the map. Here's the map. So let's spot the White House here. Help me here. There's the White House. Okay. So there's the East Wing. This is the residence of the White House. And there's the Rose Garden, by the way. I think that's where it is. Here's the Treasury Department on the other. Oh, let me pull this over a little bit so you can see. There's the Treasury Department. And I guess the thinking around this tunnel all along was that if there's some sort of crisis, the president could leave the White House East Wing, go into these tunnels, and there'd be these secure vaults in the basement of the Treasury Department where they could hide out in a crisis that would be kind of high end. This goes back like ages ago, and so that was the part of the plan, is just to get a tunnel out to the Treasury Department. So it's quite possible still it's not quite possible. It likely is what it is still under there, but they also have secure comms and other facilities underneath there in case there's some sort of crisis. And you sent me a picture today of Erica. Maybe you can help me describe people what this picture is. It's of the comms room from a different crisis.
Yeah, that's the Presidential Emergency Operations Center, I believe, on September 11th. I'm pretty sure, which is located. So if you take like the regular old, the White House and like the Willard Hotel on the other side, and then in between you have the Treasury, like kind of just a little bit west of the Treasury. That's where the Presidential Emergency Operations Center is. And it would have
in here
completely secure.
Like somewhere in there.
Somewhere a little down there. But we're looking at about, not quite 80 yards, from the East Wing of the White House to the Willard Hotel. Where Rudy Giuliani and all them other rat bastards were that day. Well, and what would be interesting about, the emergency briefing room there, the EBR, the PEOC, as it would be marked on the logbooks. But of course, Trump, I believe, didn't log any of that stuff. Like the visitor logbooks would say where a meeting was held. And there are entries in the annals of when, briefings, like there's briefings that are done in the Situation Room. I just reviewed Biden's back on doing these things. And for example, I saw an individual whose name I recognized, and I was like, oh, that guy's an interpreter. Oh, he's a Japanese interpreter. That's right. Oh, and they were at the Situation Room. It was all marked, and turned out there was a call between the Japanese Prime Minister and President Biden. And that's why this visitor to the White House came and was escorted to the Situation Room, which is super, which is secret stuff happens in there, but it's still marked that you went there. Anyhow,
the Situation Room's upstairs, though, right?
There's also
it's in the West Wing.
Now the sit room's upstairs.
Yeah.
But this is downstairs. This is underground. This is the Presidential Emergency Operations Center, which would be very interesting because it would have secure communications to the Pentagon.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe like the Senate, or
or
Capitol
everywhere,
Hill,
really.
or just to certain places. And you might have TVs that you could watch, but that would be only kind of one way. You might have phones that only went to certain places, but it would be completely secure from any passersby or any staff who might be in the White House that you think might be an informant. You could kind of winnow down the number of people there and be monitoring what was happening on television that day. And let's say you had some reason to be in contact with the Pentagon to make sure they didn't launch a quick reaction force out of that building
or anything. Yeah,
that's a place you could do that from.
Yeah, you could control anything, presumably, from there. So, and we're basically saying here that there is a theory. This is just a theory, but it is possible for Trump to get out of his Oval Office secretly, get down to the residence through that secret passage, and then find his way to this other tunnel where. Sorry, we're boring you. But,
you won't be bored long.
We're almost there. We almost made it to the end of the show.
Boys.
Sorry, we're doing lots of boy talk here. All right, I'll keep it short. I'll do one more last.
No, here's the thing, Zev. Like what I want to ask you and Eric, though, right? I mean, so here's the thing. It's like we know he got these 7 hours of call time missing. We know calls were made to individuals, right? But they also have testimony, even from Jared Kushner now, as to where he was all day. So I'm sure that they know. I mean, I think the mystery is less physically where he was and more why all his phone activity. How could his phone activity not reflect somewhere? Forgive me for asking because I don't know this answer. I was under the impression that if he made a phone call from either his presidential cell or cells or any phone in the White House, that would be in the log, right? I mean, so it has to be some phone that's not mirrored in that system. So I don't understand how this, I had never seen this stuff that you showed, Zev, about the phone number that showed up coming back to the White House. So, Eric, do you happen to know, is there some way you can use a phone from some other, office and not have it be in the logs?
To use someone else's phone.
I mean, I think a way you might do it, the interesting part geographically here is, again, think 80 yards. That's, you could, if you think of somebody running quite fast, how long you'd take to get to a touchdown or whatnot. We're not talking about a long period of time to get from there to the Willard.
Yeah.
Where you could maybe use somebody's phone and go, let's say you were going to have stuff to talk about back and forth and, you didn't want it on the books at the White House. You might get some really sensitive communications done out of that PEOC, hypothetically.
Yeah.
And then you could do some other stuff by running it over to the rat bastards like Bernie Kerik and Rudy Giuliani and the other treason weasels. Oh, by the way, since we started the show, the New York Times reported that Ali Alexander has flipped for the government. So we may be getting the answers to some of these questions.
Yeah, that's not a surprise.
I hope so, because I'm fascinated by this idea. I mean, the president, if he wants to, he can issue an order. So he could have had that tunnel going. He could have been bringing people in through the tunnel for all we know. He can do whatever the hell he wants. I mean, this is a man that forced the Secret Service into a potential death trap and to parade around, and they can't. The Secret Service can't tell us. They're not it's not like that in that role you can tell us, right? I mean, they might.
They're stealthy, fascinating. It's in their name. It's the secret part.
Yeah, Secret Service,
it's on the business card.
Yeah.
All these people went into the Willard Hotel. Giuliani was there. He had his little war room. Drew Stone was in there. There was 50 other people, according to witnesses, high-level people who were in the Willard Hotel who never came out during the entire event. They didn't, there's this giant historic event happening on their doorstep that they came to see, but they don't actually go out to see it. They just go into the Willard Hotel and never emerge. So either they're just, hanging out hotel rooms, as they like to tell us to believe, or they were having their secret war room conversations as Giuliani and Eastman were having. Or maybe it's possible that they could have gone in and out through this tunnel and through the Treasury Department and got into the White House secret tunnel operations room and had all sorts of conversations going back and forth. I mean, it's not inconceivable. There is literally, look how close. This is the Willard here. It's right here. This is the entrance to the Treasury Department. And then this is the tunnel that goes into the East room. So once you're in here, no one would know the difference. You'd be underground into the White House complex pretty quickly. I'm not saying that's happened.
Zev, you said something I think is really interesting too. It's like they came for this event. Okay. Yeah. So either they're special guest of the White House and the president, and you would think that they'd want to be at the event if they came for this event.
Yeah.
And the fact that they never leave the room, never attend the event suggests that they knew they needed to be in a staging situation, right? Like they needed a war room. Why else would they be there? And it is kind of odd that they never left the room. It's like they never intended to go to the event. And if they really truly expected it to just be a speech and a rally, why would they come and then not go to the White House, right?
It's pretty strange. So, if you had an operations room running all this downstairs under the White House East Wing, well, that would be interesting, because then it will be more easy to understand why all the events happened the way they did that day, and why there was so much reluctance for him to come out. And, did they have visibility inside the events that were going on the Capitol that we weren't aware of? That's also a possibility. It's, none of this is a lot of conjecture, and I'm going to just keep repeating this to people because I don't want to say that I'm just being a conspiracy theorist, but it is interesting that you got.
Yeah. Well, if you're the president of the United States and you don't want people to sit around and conjecture about your missing 7.5 hours, then don't go off the grid.
Don't go off the grid. Use the same phone.
Right. On the day where you're suspected of hosting a coup that, capstoned into an insurrection on the Capitol. Right?
And it really,
that's probably.
It would really explain, Eric, to your point, why maybe the Pentagon, didn't do anything that day, and why they were so reluctant to move in, and why there was all this, guidance towards the National Guard to stand down, and why the Secret Service seemed to be aware. There seemed to be a lot of knowledge by a lot of people not to do anything that day. And how would that have happened if it weren't communicated to them from the president? It just seems like that's where the order would have come from.
Yeah, because they're known as I think the slang for it is O-plan. Operational plans. If this happens, then this gets deployed, and this goes back and forth. I mean, and a lot of that stuff works whether or not sort of automatically. They may need to get authority from the president to do it, but they may also have plans to do something automatically, unless there's some reason not to do it. It would depend on the operational plan that's going to be classified, right? But here's something that gets me. Didn't they call the thing, it's like the Willard War Room? But you know what's interesting about the Presidential Emergency Operations Center is it's actually built as a war room.
Yes, this is the actual war room. In here is the actual
war room.
Yeah. So why would you call that the war room versus the Willard Hotel war room, which was just a meeting room?
Because Rudy was, he's a clownish figure, right? And so is Bannon. There's 18 shirts and smelling of 9-year-old gin and whatnot. It's all a big joke, right? But they made the National Guard stand down and allow our democracy be subject to attempted murder. Right. Much less clownish. So it's like, they're at the Willard, and it's these people that you've seen on television and their shitty podcasts, and like, why else is Steve Bannon out there doing this podcast? He's not a dumb man at all, but he has this shtick going, right? And these guys are this close, but the real action here is not, Roger Stone ginning up his buddies from the Oath Keepers, though they were critical that day. But the real action is the fact that the Department of Defense under Trump appears to have engaged in a conspiracy to allow possibly the murder of elected officials. Mm-hmm. Yep. And, this was obviously a coordinated operation, right? Mm-hmm. But in order to prove that in court, let's say a court martial for any of the people in DOD who held a rank that day and had a responsibility, or, capital crimes, let's get it out there, treason and seditious conspiracy. You have to have a state of mind, but you have to prove conspiracy. Now, we've gotten as far with the, I forget if it's the Proud Boys or the Oath Keepers, the Auxiliary Treason Association, whatever you want to call the guys in the golf carts and with their stupid polo shirts. But the real conspiracy there, they're fun to look at, and they're these guys running around in paintball gear. But the real problem was that the Department of Defense stood down our nation's actual strongest in the world defense.
That's the real scandal.
Down on purpose. Yep. So that possibly these guys could have murdered Nancy Pelosi, dragged Pence off, and then justified in insurrection, and we have enough people testifying about that. But this is an important detail because it's now coming down to, wait a minute, did these guys work together? And I think the proximity issue and the communications issue is very important. And that 7-hour window is important because, like, wait a minute, you're off the grid for 7 hours and you're within walking distance of these guys. Right. If you coordinated this shit straight out of the White House, you all need to be executed in public.
It would be pretty horrific if that's the case. I mean, it's the implications here. If this were true, it's just really horrific because you're talking about
why set the war room up in the Willard, right, where they don't control it when they could have done the Trump Hotel, right? Well, you can walk, theoretically, you can walk to the Willard secretly. You cannot do that from the Trump Hotel. And they did every fucking thing else through the Trump Hotel.
Willard is a very unusual location. Right. It's the only one that seems to have this kind of access.
It just seems weird to me. And I remember thinking, well, that's weird. It didn't connect in this way or anything. I just remember when I first read about the war room where these guys were, where Giuliani was at. I remember thinking the Willard, that's weird. Why not Trump Hotel?
Yeah, it really is weird that it shows the Willard. And there's the Mayflower. There's lots of places to stay. This is exactly the one place you would stay if you needed to get access to the White House really, really quickly and secretly. You would do that through the Treasury Department. You would go unnoticed. I mean, really, who's checking the entrance of the Treasury Department? If there isn't some sort of underground entrance between the two things as well. I mean, who knows if the Willard is interconnected to the Treasury Department somehow. It's not inconceivable that also is a possibility. But certainly there's a tunnel between the Treasury Department and the White House East Wing.
And certainly those men could be moving back and forth much easier than Donald Trump could.
Yeah, exactly. So lots of questions worth pondering, I mean, I wouldn't normally raise it unless I thought that there were just so many circumstantial questions that you have to ask. I got to play this because it's kind of funny. It is Friday. This is where Roger Stone wants us to believe he was all day. This is shot inside the Willard by the person you're about to see. She's his companion for the day.
Here we are in Roger Stone's suite watching the situation on the Capitol unfold. We are safe and sound.
Because there was this story.
That's your opinion?
There was a story that said that the DOJ has, the Department of
safe and sound.
Refused.
That's the Manhattan madam, I think, is her name. Maybe she's the Hollywood madam. That was his.
It's almost like she's trying to make sure he's got a fucking alibi.
Exactly.
I mean, that
we should put that on Instagram.
Shifty to me, dude. I don't know.
It does. It looks weird. It looks weird. The whole thing looks weird.
I mean, if I was trying to prove I wasn't involved in the insurrection physically, like that's how I would do it.
Yeah. So. Yeah. You would have the Hollywood madam there with you.
Well, I'm pretty sure I would do it nicer than that.
Yeah, there you go. I mean, I'm laughing because it's a bit funny, but it's also pretty serious, obviously. Hey, that's the end of the hour. Boy, that was a fun, fast hour.
Y'all don't have to go home, but you can't stay here.
Do you got plans for the rest of the weekend? Eric, anything fun and interesting and exciting happening in your part of the world? We never got to your story, by the way. We'll have to get to it next time. No?
No. Intense research. Because, look, we're actually, I'm not entirely joking about that. We're really getting down to the story here. This is a big deal.
I think it is a big deal. It's on the after show, and we're sort of having fun with it because it's the after show. But it's actually a real interesting story, and I think we'll dig into it a little bit more next week because there's other aspects of it that really require some real digging into, and hopefully our viewers who are brilliant at this can also do that. Eric Garland is at Eric Garland. It can also be found at Game Theory Today, is what his podcast is called. Hamilton is back in town. Hey, Hammy.
It's a 5 o'clock Hammy hug.
Hi, Hammy. Rachel Bitecofer.
This is like literally he does this every day.
He just knows.
Like,
all right, that was a good tension. That's a good Friday night tension breaker. That's a good.
Yeah, it is. I'm so glad. It's like I don't think people believe me when I tell them, look, my dog gives me a 5 o'clock hug every day and tells me it's time to get off the phone.
It is time. Hamilton needs his own Twitter account, but you can find Rachel Bitecofer at Rachel Bitecofer, if I'm not mistaken. And that's me. I'm at Zev Shalev, and that's the end of the show this week. We'll be back on Tuesday. There's so many interesting shows coming up. You just have to stick around and watch them because they are huge next week. So I hope you'll be back for that. In the meantime, I wish you all a very good night. If you're wanting to support us, you can always go to patreon.com/narrative. and become a patron of Narrative, we really rely on your donations and support to make it all work, which hopefully I'm going to be able to do when I press this button, even though it's not showing me the right screen. Good night, guys.
All
Have a great
the
weekend.
donations come directly to me, though, right, Zev?
Yeah, you could, of course. That's the deal, but we don't need to talk about it, right? All right. Good night, everyone. Narrative is made possible by viewers like you. Join today and support truly independent journalism at patreon.com/narrative. That's patreon.com/narrative.